Everyone wants something from me. Claire Whitmore's voice cracked through the thick glass door of the executive office, sharp enough to cut through the hum of late-night keyboards and fluorescent lights. And for a moment the entire 42nd floor of Whitmore Industries went still before pretending it hadn't heard a thing. Money, decisions, control. No one ever just sees me, she continued, her voice dropping into something quieter, something dangerously close to breaking. And then there was silence, the kind that settled heavy in the chest like a storm waiting to arrive. 3 cubicles away, someone coughed, another chair rolled back, footsteps faded toward the elevators, but Daniel Brooks didn't move. He stood there with a maintenance clipboard in one hand and a wrench in the other, frozen not by curiosity but by something deeper, something older, the instinct to recognize pain and not walk away from it. He had spent years learning the difference between noise and truth, between complaints and quiet cries that no one was meant to hear, and this was the second kind. The hallway lights buzzed softly overhead, casting pale reflections along the polished marble floors, and through the frosted glass he could see only the faint outline of a woman who ran a billion-dollar company, shoulders slightly hunched, head bowed in a way no boardroom had ever witnessed. "Pull it together, Claire," she whispered to herself, just loud enough to slip past the door, just soft enough to feel like a secret, and Daniel exhaled slowly, not stepping closer, not stepping away, simply choosing to remain where he was, steady and silent, like a man who understood that sometimes respect meant staying when everyone else left. A pair of executives rounded the corner, heels clicking fast, voices low and urgent. "Ignore it," one muttered. "She'll be fine. She always is." They passed Daniel without looking at him, as if he were part of the wall, part of the background that existed only to keep things running but never to be noticed, and he was used to that, had built a life around that kind of invisibility, raising his 8-year-old daughter on early mornings and late shifts, fixing what was broken without asking for recognition, carrying a quiet strength that didn't need an audience. Inside the office, a drawer slammed shut, papers shuffled, and the sound of controlled breathing replaced the earlier crack in her voice, and then the door handle turned. It happened slowly, deliberately, as if whoever stood on the other side had already rebuilt the armor the world expected her to wear. And when the door opened, Claire Whitmore stepped out in a tailored charcoal suit, her posture straight, her expression composed, every inch the CEO the headlines adored. But her eyes still held the echo of something unguarded. She stopped the moment she saw him. "You heard that?" she asked, her tone cool, precise, 3 simple words that carried both authority and warning. Daniel met her gaze, calm, unflinching. "Yes." A beat passed, quiet but heavy. "Then forget it." He didn't look away. "I won't." For a second, something flickered in her expression, not anger, not embarrassment, but something closer to confusion, as if she had spent years mastering every reaction except this one, and the hallway seemed to narrow around them, the air still, the world outside fading into a distant hum. Daniel shifted his grip on the wrench, not as a shield but as a reminder of who he was, a man who fixed things when they broke, even the ones no one else saw, and Claire Whitmore, the woman who commanded boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, stood there facing the only person in the building who hadn't turned away. And in that quiet, unplanned moment, something changed, subtle but undeniable, like the first crack of light before dawn, a shift neither of them expected but neither could ignore. Claire Whitmore did not speak again for a full 3 seconds, and in a place where time was measured in deals, deadlines, and quarterly reports, those 3 seconds felt longer than an entire board meeting. "You should get back to work," she said finally, her voice steady again, polished, the kind of tone that closed negotiations and dismissed problems in the same breath. Daniel nodded once, not submissive, not defiant, just acknowledging the moment for what it was, and turned slightly, as if to leave, but not before noticing the faint tremor in her hand as she adjusted the cuff of her blazer, a detail small enough for most to miss, but not him. The overhead lights hummed softly, casting a sterile glow across the corridor, and somewhere down the hall a printer whirred back to life, as if the building itself had decided it was safe to breathe again. "Mr. Brooks," she added, stopping him just as he took his first step away, and he paused, turning back with the same calm expression he had worn all night. "Yes, ma'am." She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, like someone standing at the edge of a sentence they were not used to saying. "What exactly do you do here?" It was a simple question, but the way she asked it carried something else beneath it, something quieter, something searching. "I fix things," he replied, his voice even, almost understated, And for a moment her lips parted as if she expected more. A list of responsibilities, a title, a justification, but nothing came. Just that. He fixes things. A flicker of something unreadable passed through her eyes, then disappeared as quickly as it came. Then fix the air conditioning in conference room B, she said, retreating back into the safety of instruction, of structure, of control. It has been inconsistent all week. It will be done before morning, Daniel answered. 3 words, no hesitation. She gave a short nod, already turning away, already rebuilding the distance between them, but something about the exchange lingered in the air long after she disappeared back into her office and the door clicked shut once more. Daniel walked down the hallway, his boots soft against the polished floor. His mind quiet but alert, the way it always was when something important had shifted even if no one had named it yet. He entered conference room B, set his tools down on the long glass table, and climbed the short ladder toward the ceiling vent, the metal cool against his fingertips as he removed the panel with practiced ease. The room smelled faintly of stale coffee and ambition, the kind that clung to spaces where decisions were made without ever touching the people they affected, and as he worked, tightening a loose connection, clearing a clogged filter, he replayed the moment in the hallway not as gossip, not as curiosity but as truth. Outside, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city stretched for miles, a grid of lights and motion and lives moving in every direction, and somewhere in that vastness was his daughter, asleep in their small apartment 15 miles away, probably curled up with the worn stuffed bear she refused to outgrow. He checked his watch. 10:47 p.m. Too late to call, but not too late to think about the promise he made every morning when he dropped her off at school, that no matter how long the day was, no matter how heavy things got, he would come back steady. He always did. The vent clicked back into place. The system hummed stronger now, smoother, and a cool, even flow of air filled the room like a quiet correction no one would notice in the morning meeting. Daniel gathered his tools, wiped his hands on a cloth, and paused for just a second, listening to the building settle into its late-night rhythm. Somewhere down the hall behind a closed door, a woman who had everything the world measured success by was trying to hold herself together in silence, and for reasons he could not fully explain, he knew this was not something he could simply walk away from. Not because it was his job, but because some things once seen asked more of you than just looking away. The next morning arrived without ceremony, just a pale wash of sunlight stretching across the glass towers and into the polished corridors of Whitmore Industries, where everything looked the same but nothing quite felt the same, at least not to the 2 people who had shared that quiet moment the night before. "You are early," Claire Whitmore said without looking up, her voice calm, measured, as Daniel stepped into conference room B with a small toolkit in hand, the air now flowing clean and even above them. "It is already fixed," he replied, setting the tools down gently on the edge of the table. She glanced up then, just briefly, her eyes scanning the room as if confirming the truth of his words, then returning to the tablet in front of her. "Of course. It is," she said, almost to herself, and for a second there was something softer in her tone, something that did not belong in a boardroom but had not yet found its place anywhere else. Outside the room, voices gathered, heels clicked, schedules moved forward like clockwork, and within minutes the space filled with executives carrying reports, projections, expectations. "We have a 10 a.m. call with the board," one of them said, placing a stack of papers near Claire. "They are concerned about the acquisition timeline," another added, "and the investors are asking for reassurance on liquidity." Claire nodded once, her posture shifting, her expression tightening into something precise and unbreakable. "We will give them clarity," she said, her voice steady again, the CO fully restored, and just like that, the moment from the night before seemed to vanish into the machinery of the day. Daniel gathered his tools quietly, stepping aside as the room transformed from a place of silence into a stage of strategy, but before he reached the door, he heard it. "We cannot afford hesitation," Claire said, her tone firm. "We move forward or we lose everything." 3 sentences, sharp and controlled, yet beneath them something strained, something holding on too tightly. The projector flickered to life, casting blue light across the room, and the hum of electronics filled the space like a low current beneath every word spoken. Daniel paused for just a fraction of a second, not turning back, just listening the way he always did when something did not quite align. "We are already stretched thin," another executive said. "This deal could break us." Claire did not respond immediately. 2 seconds. 3. Then, "It will not," she said, but the certainty did not land the way it should have. It lingered slightly off like a note just out of tune. Daniel stepped out into the hallway, the door closing softly behind him, but the weight of that conversation followed him, settling quietly into his thoughts as he moved down the corridor. The building buzzed with movement now, coffee cups in hand, conversations layered over each other, the rhythm of ambition fully awake. Yet he walked through it all untouched, steady, grounded, carrying something most people in that building had long forgotten how to carry. By noon, he was in the lower mechanical room, checking pressure valves and system gauges, the steady hiss of air and the low rumble of machinery creating a kind of silence that made thinking easier, clearer. He tightened a connection, wiped his hands and leaned back slightly, the metal cool behind him, his mind returning not to the numbers or the deal or the board, but to a single detail that did not belong in any report. The way her voice had changed when she thought no one was listening. "Everyone wants something from me." He let the words sit there, not as a problem to solve, but as something to understand, and for a man who had built his life on quiet observation, that difference mattered. Hours later, as the sun dipped lower and shadows stretched long across the city, Daniel made his way back up to the executive floor to finish a routine check, and through the glass walls of a conference room he saw them again, the same group, the same tension, only sharper now. Claire stood at the head of the table, hands resting lightly against the surface, her posture perfect, her expression composed, but her eyes carried something new, something heavier than before. "If this fails," one voice said, "there is no recovery." The room fell quiet, the kind of silence that does not ask for answers but demands them, and Claire inhaled slowly, the smallest movement almost invisible, yet enough for someone paying attention to see. Daniel stopped just outside the room, unseen, unheard, his presence as quiet as it had been the night before, and in that moment between expectation and response, between power and truth, something in the air shifted again, subtle but undeniable, as if the story unfolding inside that glass room was about to reveal more than anyone there was prepared to face. "If this fails, there is no recovery." The words lingered in the glass-walled room like a weight no one could set down, and for the first time since the meeting began, Claire did not answer right away. She stood there, hand steady against the table, her reflection faintly mirrored beneath the overhead lights. A woman who had built everything on control now standing at the edge of something she could not fully command. "We proceed," she said finally, her voice even, deliberate, but not as sharp as before, not as absolute. A few executives exchanged glances, subtle but telling, the kind of silent conversation that happened when confidence began to crack. "That is not reassurance," one of them replied. "That is risk." The room quieted again, the low hum of the projector filling the space between them, and Claire's gaze shifted slightly, not to the data, not to the charts, but toward the glass wall where, just beyond it, a figure had been standing moments ago. Daniel was no longer there, but something about his quiet presence earlier had left an imprint, something she could not quite name but could not ignore. "Risk is all we have left," she said, but the words felt different this time, less like a command and more like an admission. The meeting moved forward, voices layering over each other, numbers rising and falling, strategies clashing in controlled tones. Yet beneath it all, something had shifted, something no spreadsheet could measure. Hours passed, decisions made but not settled, confidence spoken but not fully believed, and by the time the room emptied, the sunlight had faded into a soft gray dusk that pressed gently against the windows. Claire remained alone for a moment, her shoulders lowering just slightly as the door clicked shut behind the last executive, the silence returning not as a break but as a truth. She exhaled slowly, one breath she had been holding for longer than she realized, then reached for a file on the table only to pause. The air felt different, cooler, steadier. She glanced upward instinctively, noticing the even flow from the vent, the quiet correction that had gone unnoticed by everyone else, and for reasons she could not explain, she thought of him. "He fixes things," she murmured under her breath, the words unfamiliar in her world of acquisitions and leverage, yet grounding in a way nothing else had been all day. Down the hall Daniel moved through another routine check, his steps measured, his focus steady, but his mind still carried the weight of what he had heard. He had seen pressure before in different forms in quieter places, And he knew the difference between strength that held and strength that was about to give. The building around him buzzed with evening energy, people wrapping up, conversations softening, the day releasing its grip, yet one office remained lit brighter than the rest. He did not need to check the name on the door to know whose it was. "Mr. Brooks?" a voice called from behind him, and he turned to see Claire standing a few feet away, her posture composed once more, but her eyes carrying that same quiet tension he had recognized the night before. "Yes, ma'am." She hesitated just slightly, the kind of pause that did not belong to someone used to being certain. "The lighting in my office has been inconsistent," she said, choosing the words carefully, as if they were a bridge to something else she had not yet decided to say. "Can you take a look?" Daniel nodded once. "Of course." 3 words, steady without question. She stepped aside, allowing him to enter first, an unspoken shift that neither of them acknowledged, and as he crossed the threshold into the office where she had broken down behind closed doors, the air felt different again, quieter, heavier, more honest. He set his tools down near the wall, glancing briefly at the overhead fixture, already knowing what needed to be done, and as he reached up to adjust the panel, Claire remained standing near her desk, watching, not with authority, not with expectation, but with something far more unfamiliar. "Do you always stay?" she asked suddenly. He paused, looking down at her, not confused, just considering the question for what it really was. "When something needs fixing," he replied. The light flickered once, then steadied, filling the room with a warm, even glow, and in that quiet moment, something else settled too, something neither of them had planned, but both were beginning to understand. The light steadied above them, soft and even, casting a warmth that did not belong to corporate spaces but lingered anyway, and for a moment neither of them spoke, as if the room itself had shifted into something quieter than either of them expected. "It was not the light," Claire said finally, her voice lower now, less guarded, as she moved a few steps closer but kept a careful distance, the kind that came from years of knowing where lines were drawn. Daniel lowered his hand from the fixture, stepping down from the small ladder with a calm precision, setting his tools aside without looking away from her. "I figured," he replied, simple, direct, not pressing further, and that restraint landed heavier than any question could have. She studied him then, not as an employee, not as a problem to solve, but as something unfamiliar, something she had not built a framework for. "Most people would have asked," she said. "Most people are looking for something," he answered. 3 sentences, quiet, unforced. The air hummed gently through the vent, a steady current that seemed to anchor the space between them, and outside the windows the last of the daylight faded into a deepening blue, the city lights beginning to take over one by one. Claire exhaled slowly, her shoulders easing just slightly, as if the weight she carried had shifted, not gone, but no longer pressing in the same way. "Do you know what it is like?" she began, then paused, her eyes drifting briefly toward the skyline before returning to him. "To build something so large that it no longer belongs to you?" The question hung there, not rhetorical, not polished but real, and Daniel did not answer immediately. 2 seconds passed. 3. Then, "I know what it is like to hold on to something because you have to," he said, his voice steady, grounded in something deeper than theory. She nodded faintly, absorbing that, not fully understanding but recognizing the truth in it. A phone buzzed softly on her desk, the screen lighting up with a name she did not reach for. "Not yet," and the silence stretched again, not uncomfortable, just honest. "They think I am in control," she said, almost to herself. "They need me to be." "Do you?" he asked. It was not a challenge, not a test, just a question placed carefully, and for the first time since he had known her, Claire did not have an immediate answer. The lights overhead remained steady, the soft glow reflecting off the glass and steel around them, and in that reflection she caught a glimpse of herself that did not match the version the world saw, a version that was quieter, more uncertain, but also more real. She let out a small breath, something between a sigh and a release. "I do not know anymore," she admitted, the words barely above a whisper, but in the stillness they carried weight. Daniel did not move closer, did not offer reassurance, did not try to fix what she had just said, and that absence of reaction felt different than anything she had experienced in years. Felt like space. He reached for his tools, closing the latch on the box with a soft click, the sound grounding, practical, reminding both of them that the world outside this room still existed, still moved forward. "The system is stable now," he said, a simple statement returning to what he knew, what he could control. Claire gave a small nod, but her eyes did not leave him. Daniel, she said, his name unfamiliar on her tongue, as if she had just decided to use it for the first time. If something bigger is breaking, how do you know where to start? He paused at the door, his hand resting lightly on the handle, considering the question not as a task but as something that mattered. The hallway beyond was quiet now, the building settling into its evening rhythm, the low hum of distant systems the only sound. You start with what is true, he said, turning slightly, meeting her gaze one more time. Not what looks strong, not what sounds right, just what is true. The words settled into the room, simple, unadorned, but carrying a weight that lingered long after they were spoken, and as he stepped out into the hallway, leaving the door slightly ajar behind him, Claire remained where she was, standing in the steady light, holding on to something she had not allowed herself to consider before, the possibility that the strongest move she could make was not control but honesty. The hallway outside her office felt quieter than before, as if the building itself had absorbed the weight of what had just been said, and Daniel walked through it with the same steady pace, his toolbox light in his hand but his thoughts carrying something heavier, something that did not belong to wires or vents or systems. You start with what is true. The words lingered, not because he had said them, but because of the way she had received them, like someone hearing a language they had forgotten they once understood. Downstairs, the service elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, and he stepped inside, pressing the button for the lower level, the metal walls reflecting a quiet, unassuming man most people in that building never really saw. The elevator hummed as it descended, a low, steady vibration that matched the rhythm of his thoughts, and for a moment, everything was simple again, contained, manageable. But upstairs, things were beginning to shift. Cancel the call with the board, Claire said, her voice calm but unmistakably firm, as her assistant froze mid-step, tablet in hand. I am sorry, the assistant asked, unsure if she had heard correctly. Cancel it, Claire repeated, not raising her voice, not adding explanation, just stating a decision that did not follow the pattern anyone expected. The office around her seemed to pause, conversations stalling, glances exchanged, the kind of ripple that only happened when something fundamental changed. But the investors are waiting, the assistant pressed carefully. Claire's gaze did not waver. Then they will wait. 3 sentences. Clean. Final. The assistant nodded slowly, stepping away, and the door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. The room settled into silence again, but this time it was different, not heavy with pressure, but open, uncertain, like the space after a storm breaks but before the sky clears. Claire moved toward the window, her heels quiet against the floor, and looked out over the city that had once felt like something she controlled but now felt like something she had been chasing. The light stretched for miles, endless, indifferent, and for the first time in a long time, she was not thinking about numbers or outcomes or expectations. She was thinking about truth. Down on the lower level, Daniel checked the last system on his list, tightening a valve, listening to the steady flow return to normal, his hands moving with the confidence of someone who had done this 1,000 times, but his mind still carried the echo of her question. If something bigger is breaking, how do you know where to start? He closed the panel, wiped his hands and leaned back slightly, the cool air settling around him, and for a moment he thought of his daughter again, the way she would ask simple questions that did not have easy answers, the way she trusted him to find them anyway. He checked his watch. 6:15 p.m. Still enough time to make it home before she fell asleep if he left soon. He gathered his tools, the familiar weight grounding him, reminding him of the life that existed outside these walls, the one that mattered most. But as he stepped back into the elevator, something told him the night was not finished yet. Upstairs, Claire turned away from the window, her reflection fading from the glass as she made a decision that did not come from strategy or pressure, but from something quieter, something steadier. She reached for her phone, hesitated for just a second, then set it back down. Not yet. Instead, she walked to her desk, pulled out a blank notepad, and for the first time in years, she did not start with numbers or projections or plans. She wrote one word at the top of the page. Truth. The pen paused in her hand, the silence around her no longer something to fill, but something to listen to, and somewhere in that silence something began to take shape, something that did not follow the rules she had built her entire career on, but felt right in a way those rules never had. And miles below the surface of everything she had created, a quiet man stepped out of an elevator, unaware that the simplest words he had spoken were already beginning to change the course of something far bigger than either of them had expected. The words sat alone on the page, simple and unpolished, and for a long moment Claire Whitmore did not write anything else, as if everything she had built depended on what came next, and for once she was not rushing to fill the space. Truth, she whispered softly, testing the weight of it in her own voice, and it did not sound like strategy or leverage or control. It sounded like something far more dangerous, something that could not be managed once it was spoken. The city outside had fully settled into night, lights stretching endlessly, indifferent to decisions made behind glass walls, and inside her office, the silence no longer felt like pressure but like permission. 3 knocks came at the door, light, hesitant. "Come in," she said, her tone steady, though something beneath it had shifted. Her assistant stepped in, careful, measured. "The board is asking for a statement," she said. "They want reassurance." Claire leaned back slightly, the pen still in her hand, her gaze drifting once more to that single word on the page. "They will get one," she replied. "But not tonight." The assistant hesitated. "They will not like that." Claire gave a faint, almost tired smile. They were never going to like the truth anyway. 2 sentences, quiet but final. The assistant nodded slowly, stepping back, closing the door behind her, leaving Claire alone again, but not the same kind of alone she had been before. Down on the street level, the night air was cooler, carrying the distant sound of traffic and life moving on, and Daniel stepped out of the building, his shoulders relaxing just slightly as he adjusted the strap of his worn bag. He checked his phone. One missed message. "Did you fix everything today, Dad?" The text from his daughter was simple, innocent, and it pulled a small smile from him that nothing inside that tower ever could. "Almost everything," he typed back, then paused, rereading it, and added, "I am heading home now." The streetlight above him flickered once before settling into a steady glow, casting long shadows across the pavement, and as he began to walk, something in his chest felt lighter, even though he knew something heavier had been set in motion behind him. Upstairs, Claire stood once more, the pen moving now, not quickly, not with the sharp precision of business plans, but slowly, deliberately, as if each word mattered in a way numbers never had. "We have been presenting strength," she wrote, her handwriting steady but unguarded. "But we have been avoiding truth." She paused, the pen hovering above the paper, the silence deepening around her, and for a second doubt crept in, familiar, practiced, the voice that had guided her through every high-stakes decision. "This is not how you lead," it seemed to say. She closed her eyes briefly, exhaling, then continued writing anyway. "We are at risk. And I am responsible." The words landed harder than anything she had said in years, not because they were weak but because they were real. The room seemed to hold its breath with her. The steady hum of the building the only sound that remained constant, grounding, unchanging, while everything else shifted. Miles away, Daniel pulled into the small parking lot of his apartment complex, the engine of his truck cutting off with a soft rumble, the world around him quiet in a different way, simpler, more honest. He stepped out, grabbing his bag, and as he walked toward the dimly lit stairwell, he glanced up at the night sky, barely visible between the buildings, and for a moment, he allowed himself to breathe fully, deeply, something he had learned to do long before any of this. He did not know what Claire Whitmore would do with the truth she had begun to face, and he did not expect to be part of it, but somewhere deep down, he understood something most people missed. When someone chooses truth over control, everything changes. And back on the 42nd floor, in a room filled with quiet and light and the weight of a decision finally being made, Claire Whitmore picked up her phone, looked at the name of the board chairman glowing on the screen, and for the first time in her career, she did not feel the need to impress him, to outmaneuver him, or to protect herself from him. She only felt one thing. "Ready. Put him on the line," Claire said, her voice calm, measured, and for the first time that night, completely unshaken by what might come next. "Ma'am, the chairman is already waiting," her assistant replied through the speaker, a quiet urgency in her tone. "Good," Claire answered. "So am I." 3 sentences, steady, grounded, and then the line clicked as the call connected. "Claire." The chairman's voice came through, smooth, practiced, carrying the weight of expectation. "We were beginning to wonder if you intended to address the situation tonight." Claire did not rush to respond. 1 second passed. 2. The silence stretched just enough to shift the balance of the conversation. "I do," she said finally, her voice clear, unembellished. "But not in the way you expect." A pause followed, subtle but sharp. "Then explain," he said. Claire glanced once at the page in front of her, the word truth still anchoring everything she was about to say, and then she spoke. "We are overextended," she said. "The acquisition is not stable. And if we move forward without correcting that, we risk everything we have built." The words landed clean, without hesitation, without defense, and for a moment, no one on the other end spoke. The faint hum of the line filled the space, a quiet reminder that something had shifted in a way no one could easily control. "That is not what we discussed." Another voice cut in, sharper, more impatient. "What we discussed," Claire replied, "was based on what we wanted to believe, not what is true." 3 sentences. No apology. No retreat. The city lights reflected softly across the glass behind her, steady and indifferent, as if they had seen this moment 1,000 times before in different forms. "You are suggesting we pull back?" the chairman asked, his tone tightening slightly. Claire exhaled once, slow and controlled. "I am saying we need to stop pretending this is safe," she answered, "and start making decisions that are real." The silence that followed was different now, not uncertain, not hesitant but heavy, like something settling into place whether anyone agreed with it or not. "This will not go over well with the investors," the chairman said. "No," Claire replied. "It will not." A beat passed. "But it will keep us honest." The call did not end immediately. Questions came, measured, strategic, cautious, but Claire answered each one the same way, not with performance, not with calculated reassurance, but with clarity, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tone on the other end began to change, not into agreement but into something quieter, something closer to respect. Miles away, Daniel sat at a small kitchen table, a half-finished sandwich in front of him, listening as his daughter talked about her day, her voice light, unfiltered, the kind of honesty that did not need to be learned because it had never been lost. "And then I told her that was not fair," she said, her hands moving as she spoke, "because it was not true." Daniel smiled faintly, nodding as he listened. "What happened next?" he asked. "She got quiet," his daughter said, like she did not know what to say anymore. Daniel leaned back slightly, the soft light above them casting a warm glow across the small room, and for a moment, he thought about the difference between silence that came from fear and silence that came from truth. They sounded the same, but they meant something very different. Back in the high-rise office, the call finally ended with no grand conclusion, no dramatic agreement, just a quiet understanding that something had changed and could not be undone. Claire set the phone down slowly, her hand steady, her breathing even, and for a moment she did nothing. The room was silent again, but not the same silence as before. This one did not press in. It opened up. She walked toward the window, her reflection meeting her in the glass, and for the first time in a long time, she did not see someone holding everything together. She saw someone who had chosen to stop pretending. And somewhere, far below the lights and decisions and expectations, a man who fixed what was broken sat quietly at a kitchen table, unaware that the simplest truth he had offered had just rewritten the course of something far beyond either of their worlds, leaving behind not noise, not chaos, but something far more powerful. A silence that meant everything had changed. The next morning did not arrive with applause or celebration, only a quiet shift in the air that most people could not explain but all of them could feel. She pulled back the deal, one executive whispered near the coffee station, his voice low but edged with disbelief. Not just delayed it. She stopped it. Another shook her head slightly. That was half our projected growth for the year. The office buzzed, not loudly, not chaotically, but with a kind of restrained tension that moved from desk to desk like a current, subtle but undeniable. "What is she thinking?" someone asked. No one answered. On the 42nd floor, Claire Whitmore walked into the boardroom with the same composed posture she had always carried, but there was something different now, something that did not come from authority or expectation, but from clarity. "We are adjusting our position," she said, her voice steady as she addressed the room. "We are not moving forward with the acquisition." 3 sentences. Direct. Final. The board members shifted in their seats, papers rustling softly, eyes narrowing not in anger, but in recalculation. "This is a significant deviation," one of them said. Claire nodded once. "It is," she replied, "because the previous direction was not sustainable." The projector hummed quietly, untouched, as if the numbers no longer held the same weight they once did. And for a moment, no one challenged her further. Not because they agreed, but because something in her tone left no room for performance. Outside the room, Daniel stepped off the elevator, toolbox in hand, the routine of his morning unchanged, the quiet rhythm of his work steady as always. He moved down the hallway, checking systems, adjusting small things no one noticed, his presence as invisible as ever. Yet the building around him felt different, lighter in a way that did not come from temperature or airflow, but from something deeper, something that had shifted overnight. "Mr. Brooks," a voice called, and he turned to see Claire standing near the glass wall of the conference room, her expression composed, but her eyes clearer than he had ever seen them. "Yes, ma'am." She hesitated for just a second, the smallest pause, then stepped closer. "The lighting in the boardroom," she said, her tone measured. "It is different." Daniel glanced up briefly, already understanding. "It is stable now," he replied. She gave a small nod, but did not look away. "So is everything else," she said quietly, almost as if she was testing the words more than stating them. 2 sentences. Soft. Certain. The hallway lights reflected gently across the glass, the low hum of the building steady and calm, and for a moment the world around them slowed, not because anything dramatic had happened, but because something real had. "You were right," she said, her voice just above a whisper. Daniel shook his head slightly. "No," he answered. "You just chose to see it." 3 sentences. Simple. Honest. She held his gaze for a moment longer, then nodded once, not as a CEO acknowledging an employee, but as a person recognizing something she could not measure but would not forget. Inside the boardroom, the conversation had quieted, the usual push and pull of power replaced by something more restrained, more thoughtful, as if the absence of illusion had left only what mattered. No applause. No resistance loud enough to break the moment. Just silence. And in that silence something settled into place, not perfectly, not completely, but truthfully. Daniel turned back to his work, moving down the hallway with the same steady pace, his role unchanged, his presence still quiet, still unseen by most, and yet the impact of what he had offered remained, not in recognition or reward, but in the way the world around him had shifted without needing to announce it. Claire stood there for a moment longer, watching him go, the noise of the building returning slowly around her, and for the first time in a long time, she did not feel the need to control it, to shape it, or to rise above it. She simply stood in it, grounded, present, and when she finally turned back toward the boardroom, the room did not fall silent because of her title or her power. It fell silent because something true had been spoken, and no one in that room could pretend they had not heard it.